And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to another victorious edition of Hoosier Morning After. This is Hoosier Morning After Xavier. 2 nights ago, your Indiana Hoosiers go on to beat Xavier 81-79 in the first really big challenge of the season for this IU basketball team. Something that was very good to see, the outcome, and was not at all an easy game for IU. At the end, it got a little hairy for us. Miller Kopp hitting a 3 late in the game, his first 3 of the game, putting IU up 8 with 2 minutes left. Then a stretch of some very hairy basketball for IU with 2 fouls, 2 turnovers, made it a very close game. But in the end, IU holds out and wins it by 2. I think Vegas, knowing their odds very well, I think it was a 2.5 point difference in the spread on that. But good to see IU get over the hump in that. And one thing I want to comment on before I pass it over to Martha, who's here with me, as always, is just how well this schedule is lined up for IU so far. Again, having those first couple games and the way those fell together, and then to have this tough road game. And again, things to learn from. And in early basketball, November basketball especially, you don't want your team's hitting on all cylinders. You want to have those games where your team is going to struggle and have some things to have to get over, some things to learn from. And we have those things. So Martha, what was your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it was one we had circled just because, you look at the storylines and you look at the way Indiana looked early in the season, and, Xavier's never, they're always a consensus top 25 team, and they're bringing Sean Miller back, and you knew it wasn't going to be a place you're just going to walk into and get a W. You knew it was going to be tough, and especially with their front court. That's I left the game really kind of impressed by their front court. So I was really anxious to see how we looked in that environment, especially with our freshmen and things like that. And it lived up to the billing, right? It was kind of a rock fight at times. It didn't always look the cleanest, but that's how road games look, and that's how you win on the road. And we found a way, and I know we're going to talk about him here shortly, but for everything for all the concerns we had about Xavier Johnson, he's a guy that kind of put us on his back and got it done when we needed him to get it done. So to be able to go in there, get a win like that early in the season, as the season wears on, and we're looking at Selection Sunday, I think it's a W we're going to look back on and be like, man, I'm glad we have that one. So a win's a win at the end of the day, and I'm really glad that we left with one on Friday.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition. We'll pile right into that. Xavier Johnson was someone that leading into this game, he had struggled. It's flat out easy to say and obvious to say. We hadn't seen true Xavier Johnson that we saw at the end of last year, and in this game, that's who we saw. He was getting downhill. He had the speed that he's had. We already saw his defense start to come back, and we definitely saw that in this game. He finishes with some fantastic shooting. 7 for 8 from the field, 2 for 2 on threes, 7 for 10 from the free throw, 2 assists, 4 turnovers, a little rough there. But just a good game from him. Finishes with 29 minutes in 9 plus minus on the plus minus, a plus 9, I should say, in that. So yeah, just an overall really good game from him. That senior leadership you want to see, and that's kind of the theme as well in this game, is that some of the other pieces may have struggled, and we'll get into it with them specifically, but this is what you want from your senior leaders, and Xavier Johnson and Trace Jackson Davis, for when the team struggles or when you aren't getting production from any others, that they can step up and take care of things. And Xavier Johnson did that, and he stayed, again, right on that razor's edge that we want him to be on as far as his speed, his control, and his emotions. And he was right there on it. And let's not talk too much about the T's. I want to get on those independently, but he just played like we want to see Xavier Johnson play for this team and what we want to get from him moving forward. What did you see?
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, because you look at you look at Trace and X, and then you look at the way they performed and the way they shot the basketball, and then you combine the other three starters, and we don't win without that, right? I mean, the first three games, it was pretty. We had some pretty consistent scoring across the board in terms of both with our starting five and then with our second five, and we didn't have that on Friday, and so that meant somebody had to step up, and it was our stars, the ones we needed to. So really, really encouraging to see, because I think with the other starters, Water's going to find its level a little bit. I mean, there were some wide open looks that were missed. You saw Miller Kopp miss some threes and things like that. So I think we're going to get more performance from them moving forward. But it was just nice that we could still claw it out. And one other thing that we had seen leading up to this game was really our second five would have been the kind of the one that had come in and kind of leveled some things out when we didn't get off to a hot start, and that really didn't happen either. So for us to kind of overcome that challenge too, we kind of it felt like in the moment we were kind of riding our second unit a little bit too long. It's like, where's Trace? Get him back out there. We're falling behind by 6-8 points. And so that was good to see too, right? It's just, that's what makes good teams, is you're over, in the moment you're able to overcome, there's always going to be some type of curveball, and we were able to overcome it and get the win. So I'm encouraged by what I saw. Again, it wasn't always pretty, but at the end of the day, we left Cincinnati with a win.
Yep. And another storyline that people were talking about, Jalen Hood-Schifino doesn't have the greatest shooting that he has, but he does finish with 4 assists and 1 turnover. Just kind of, that's a great kind of stat line for a freshman and for a point guard. 1 for 9 from the field. That one shot that he did make was that very long 3, which that was at least good to see. But in a game where Xavier Johnson goes off on a shooting tangent like he does, I guess you don't necessarily need the offensive production from him like that, but it is good to see at least he impacts the game the way he did. I did like seeing that he didn't let that frustrate him and he was still staying aggressive with it. Now, I do think that he didn't shoot a single free throw. I feel like he was fouled a good amount in that. And maybe that might have been part of the reason some of his shooting was off again, the little more physicality, the little more high caliber athleticism now that he's facing is a little bit higher notch than what he's used to. And so, yes, some struggles from him, but a relatively decent game. What did you think of Jalen?
Yeah, it was another. I was anxious to see how he performed in that environment, right? It's one thing to come out in Assembly Hall against the opponents that we played and really shine, but this is the first time that he's faced an opponent like Xavier on the road in an environment that was rowdy. And clearly he didn't have his A game, but that was okay. He did what he needed to do. His shot wasn't there. He was 1 for 9, but it didn't really have the approach that he was trying to force things that weren't there. I mean, he tried hitting some jumpers off the run and kind of doing his thing, and it just wasn't there. And that's okay, right? He still contributed in other areas with his free throws and his assist to turnover ratio and things like that. So, he did what we needed him to do. All the while with X stepping up. So again, I think it's going to pay dividends, because I don't think you're always going to see that Hood-Schifino on the road, right? He's just going to get better in these situations. It's again, to have this type of game early in the year, we're not used to this, right? Game 3, game 4 on the road. It's not what we've seen historically in the recent past with Indiana road schedules or early season schedules. So again, I think this is going to be great for experience, great for learning, and it's going to pay dividends as we move forward.
And keeping with the freshmen, Malik had his first real test and real taste, as well as Jalen, as I just said, with more skilled bigs and more physicality and everything. And he stepped up. He had a fantastic game in times where we saw Race Thompson kind of struggle and not exactly have the best game for Race. I wouldn't say he had a bad game, but to have him be able to go in there, and honestly, Coach gave him quite a bit of run in the second half, and for him to handle those minutes well and produce very well against guys finishing 5 for 9 with 12 points. He had the little baptism by fire at the end of the game there too, where maybe the guard should have hold on to it a little bit longer. Miller Kopp and Xavier Johnson should have held on to it and not got it over to him for them to be able to foul him and send Malik to the free throw line like that. That's quite a bit of pressure for a freshman. Would have liked that on our senior shoulders a little bit more, but his physicality and everything, he kept with it. He fought through a lot of the fouls that I thought they could have called for him on the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, I think he stayed true and did really well against some very skilled big guys for Xavier. Just another shining moment for him and excitement for post Trace Jackson Davis, a big man for next year. What'd you see from Malik?
I think the most encouraging thing with Malik is the way he embraced the moment, right? I mean, and the emotion that he played with. I thought his technical was a little ticky tacky. It was one that I don't think was necessarily warranted, and you saw the coaches really working with him to try to keep his emotions in check. But quite frankly, I enjoyed the chip he kind of played with on his shoulder. Obviously we want to make sure he keeps it. He does okay with it and doesn't get too far out of whack in terms of playing with too much emotion that causes problems. But I thought the technical was a little bit unwarranted, but he's a guy. I mean, he just made his presence known immediately. I mean, there was one trip down the court that sticks out to me specifically where he was able to get the rebound 2 or 3 times and end up finishing it. All the while, to me, it looked like he got fouled at the same time. And this was against, I think Nunji was in there, and it was Fairhurst, or I think it's his last name for Xavier. I mean, he's in there battling their number one bigs and didn't bat an eye one bit. So that's what's encouraging. You mentioned it, life after, there is going to be life after Race and Trace. And here's a guy that's showing he's ready to take it on today. So just continues to be a man down low. And for a freshman, that's so encouraging to see, especially as we continue to move forward for depth and obviously the Big Ten grind. So really, really encouraged by his play and just continue to be impressed by his development so quick.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it. We could maybe talk about it here. And I don't like whining or complaining too much, obviously, especially if we lose a game, about the refereeing or the officiating and everything. But it just felt really out of whack in this game. And I think both teams, it was on both sides. I mean, I would say IU definitely benefited from some very chippy calls in at the start of the second half. And then it kind of leveled out and we got some chippy calls against us towards the end of the second half. But those technical calls, and I know, I guess it's been something that they've decided they're going to focus on this year is the talking and the chatter and the taunting and everything between players. They're trying to crack down on it this year. But that's a bit much. That's the way kids like to play ball nowadays, is the talking. That's, I think, partially due to social media and that whole environment and everything. Ever since the mixtape and one and all that situation came out, it's just fun. It's fun to chatter and everything. And half the time, if you watch these games, guys that'll chatter up like crazy during the game will turn around and go hug at the end of the game. Because it's just about that. It's on the court. It's just about the environment. It's just how they get motivated, how they get cooked up. We know that's a big thing for Tamar. He's a big chatter. If you've ever been to a game, you can kind of see that stuff a lot more when you're physically at the games, but he's quite a bit of a talker. Xavier Johnson is as well. And to call it like that is rough. I mean, Xavier Johnson, I know it's tough for him because it's not like the normal court system. You're not innocent until proven guilty. Your past transgressions definitely weigh heavy on that. And referees and officials know, all right, this player's a hothead. We've had to call things against, or I got to stay close to him again. So they're going to be quicker to the trigger. And they definitely were on Xavier Johnson. The ref that called the tech on Xavier, Xavier's back was to him when he gave that look to the bench. And that's something that he maybe thought he said something. Did he call it just on the look? If he called it just on the look, that's horrible. If he did say something, yeah, okay, maybe. And then you had the Malik technical, and Malik makes a dunk after, again, he's been banging down there with those guys, and those guys have been fouling him, and he feels emotional because, yes, now I finally got one on you. You can't foul me now when I flush it in your face, kind of thing, and kind of maybe didn't even look like he said something, but looked like it was a look and a kind of growl or a yell or something like that, an immediate tech. And I can't stand those because, again, that one did kind of change the pace of the game and everything. And IU had some momentum there, and that definitely did kill some of that momentum. Your kind of thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, all that. It's, whether it's a point of emphasis, I also read that retired official, Terry Weimer's taking over for the Big Ten head of officiating, and he was in attendance at that game. So did that have anything to do with it? Were these officials trying to, make
show off for the boss?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't even know I don't even know if they were Big Ten officials. I don't know all of that, but what I do know, I'm hard pressed to believe that Xavier, and maybe he did. I could be wrong, but I don't think he turns back and stares at the bench if they don't chirp in his ear first. And when you first see that on TV, you're like, oh, what did he say? The assumption is he probably said something, the official overheard it, and he gets the technical. And then on replay, when they showed the different angles, that's not what happened. He didn't even move his mouth. And so then you're left thinking, you're really going to give a tech to a guy that turns around and just gives a stare to the bench? I mean, that not only is that unwarranted, it comes off as you're not allowing these kids to enjoy the moment whatsoever. And it's not like, I mean, yeah, you're showing them up ever so slightly, but at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal. It's like, let him play. If he's running his mouth, it's one thing. If he's saying stuff he shouldn't, there's a line and you can't cross it. But at the end of the day, let him have a little bit of fun. I mean, to your point, a lot of these guys know each other. They're gonna laugh about it after the game. They're gonna hug about it after the game. It's competitive nature to do some of that stuff. And when you start getting in the way of it, it comes off as really annoying and like you're not letting them enjoy the moment. At the end of the day, we're talking about, 18 to 23, 24-year-olds. And, when you start doing some of that stuff, it just comes off as I don't know. I think it needs to change a little bit. I mean, there's obviously a line, but neither of what I saw from Xavier, from either of them, from Xavier or Malik, in my opinion, warranted, a technical. And again, it's there's all the storylines, and maybe they came in saying, hey, we're going to make sure we keep, we don't want this to turn into something that it shouldn't. And if we see any of that stuff, we're going to nip it in the bud right away. Maybe that was the directive going in, but at the end of the day, to me, it just didn't come off as, because it could have really affected the game. I mean, you're talking about a close game, and when you issue a couple technicals and a couple free throws, that could be the difference in a win and a loss. So I think, I don't know. I didn't like it at all, but obviously I hope it's something that the coaching staff works with the guys to help them keep their emotions in check, and it's not necessarily an issue moving forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Then to get the obvious high point out of the way and everything, again, something that we always want to overlook and everything, but Trayce Jackson-Davis continues to show why he's an all-star. And why we're going to be very sad to see him go. And again, he is becoming a legend for IU basketball. I mean, he cemented that coming back, and what he's going to do for this team this year, the records he's going to set and everything. But shooting 13 for 16, again, shooting at such a high rate, not only just the amount of shots, but what he's making 30 points, 4 for 6 from the free throw. Not as many rebounds as you'd want to see, 6, a little shy of that double-double. Again, that's partially because of those big guys that he has, but playing a really good game and kind of really shouldering this team and continuing to do the great things that we like to see from him, and setting those expectations high for us, and where these types of play and play when he just scores 20 points or so, we're going to overlook because we're expecting big games like this. What do you think of Trayce?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's almost become an expectation that he's going to be a guy that puts up a crazy stat line, and we're just going to kind of look over it. But I mean, 13 for 16 from the field, and does what he needs to do at the free throw line, and just, to put up a 30 piece on the road against that front court. I mean, man, look out. And, you got to keep your eye on the trace tracker too. And the way he continues to move up the Indiana all-time leading scorers list. He's less than 100 points from topping this list of individuals. So if you look at the list, he will be in 8th place here probably within the next week to 2 weeks. But the guys he's going to cross over are Brian Evans, Eric Anderson, Christian Watford, Kent Benson, and Damon Bailey. That's quite the list. And then he'll have a little bit of climb to get to Allen Henderson and Yogi Ferrell, but it won't be long. And then in front of him is going to be his old head coach, Mike Woodson. So that'll be fun when he's chasing him down on the all-time scorers list. But to your point, yeah, I mean, to your point, it's become a bit of an afterthought that, here's a guy that's been with us for a while and we're kind of used to him doing what he does, but we don't win without him. And, it's a pretty dominant performance. And at times he makes it look really, really easy, which is why I think we're so used to it. It's like, oh, it's Trace being Trace. But it's special, man. It's fun to see. And really glad he came back to not only give us a chance to do some fun things this season, but really to cement himself, in the history of all-time great Indiana basketball players. So it's going to be fun to watch throughout the season, and something I'm pretty excited about.
Yep, and I see Chris is in the chat, IU Artifacts, and we'll definitely have Chris on at some point towards the end of the season. If not even earlier, he'll be able to drum up some of those stats and talk about the history of IU basketball and how Trace is going to kind of fit in there and where he's going to stand as we look back on this like 10 plus years from now. So it's kind of an exciting thing that we can do down the road with Chris on the show and everything. Shifting over to a few of the interesting kind of struggles. While we did have Xavier and Trace Jackson Davis step up and play really well for this team, where this game lacked was in the wings. Our wings really struggled in this game. Trey Galloway and Tamar Bates kind of came in, and between them, only one of them took a shot. And I hate to see that, because I know Tamar can be such a difference maker off the bench with his energy and his excitement and explosiveness. And to see zeros across the board as far as shooting from him shouldn't be. I think in any time he got 11 minutes. If he gets at least 10 minutes in a game, I at least want to see 2 shots out of him. I want to see him try to find the ball, find a way, because he moves well when he's in there in the game. And that's one of the reasons we like to see that second unit come in, because they move a lot more off the ball than we see the first unit go. And to not see him take those shots, it is disappointing. But one bright side to say about the wings, and a stat that I think someone tweeted out, I think it was Zach maybe on Twitter, that Trey through the last 3 games hasn't committed a turnover. So that's great to see. 23 minutes in this game. But again, just 1 shot from him. I think it was on a drive. And then also to lump in Miller in with that group, struggled a little bit, only scoring 7 points, making that 1-3 at the end that was very big, and then those 2 free throws at the end as well. Your thoughts on those players?
It's you and I were joking before we went live about we were talking about the Indiana football game yesterday, and the fact that we scored 39 points while completing 2 of 6 passes for, I think, 39 yards. And it reminded me of, when I look at the box score and you take Xavier and Trace out and you start looking at the box score. And if somebody were to show you that, on Thursday or Friday before the game, you'd have been like, holy cow, we're really, really going to struggle. I mean, because you look at, for Tamar, Trey, and Jordan to have 1 piece or one point combined. And then you look at, you even take it a step further and look at Race and Miller going, 1 for 8 from 3-point land. You're really, because we saw a lot of things good with the group we just mentioned leading up to the game. And you're like, okay, we need that to continue to be successful. So if you look at that, just from that standpoint, and the lack of points and the struggles from 3-point land and I was really, Ray seems to have gotten pretty comfortable behind the 3-point line, and that's good when you're feeling it, but you've got to know when you're not too. And so there are some things that you leave a little bit, I don't know that concerns the word, but man, we've got some opponents here on the schedule where we'd really hope we get kind of back into form in that area. But yeah, to your point, they were still able to come in and provide some steady minutes when they needed to. Early in the game, I thought we kind of stuck with that second group too long, and really thought I'd see a little bit more out of that group from a scoring standpoint too. You want to see one of those Tamar games that we've talked a lot about, and it hasn't been there on the offensive end, and we've talked a lot about how good he's been on the defensive end too. And Xavier didn't have a whole lot of trouble scoring on Friday. It didn't seem like. I forget what their points per possession was, but it was pretty high with the way we played defense so far this season. So yeah, you really want. Hopefully we see that second group step up when we play some solid opponents. We're going to need them to. Thankfully, we were still able to get the win. But I mean, to your point again, just when we've got Trey out there, when we've got Jordan out there, and even Tamar to a sense, there's still this steady feeling, right? It's not the feeling of years past where it's like, oh man, we have no depth. These guys, they're not coming in turning the ball over. You're not fearful for a lead. So still feel really, really comfortable with that group. You don't see it in the box score, but they're going to have every chance to prove that it's that Friday was the outlier, and that we'll get them back to their early season form for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great point to bring up. I didn't kind of think of it that way. Thanks for bringing that up. And it's interesting with this team because this team is definitely a team that can get by on most of the games when you have 3 impact players, and when it's going to be Trace and X, most likely being 2 of those, and then when you have like a third person just contributing to a degree, this team can get by in most of its season. Now, where it's going to excel and be great is when you get a fourth or fifth person to kind of go off and have a great game. Again, this game, it was Xavier, Trace Jackson Davis, and I believe Malik. I would call Malik that third kind of breakout person that you think of. But when you think of other games that we've had, there's been more people that you want to talk about going over the top or doing more than they need to. Now, again, we can shelter some of that with having X and Trace Jackson Davis to step up the way they need to, and especially having X firing all cylinders like he did in this game. I do want to bring up, Greg asked a question earlier that I wanted thoughts on the defending against Jack Nunge during this game. For a guy who was shooting over 50% from 3, I can't recall him even shooting one on Friday, especially Woodson comparing him to Dickinson. I thought it was good. Yeah, I think they did do a lot of good coverage on him coming out and protecting that. I think a lot of that might have to do with that IU's bigs are a little bit more mobile than a lot of the other bigs that maybe Xavier has seen in the past or that Nunge has had to deal with. So they confront him a little bit more on those shots and not have to worry about recovering on the bounce against him. Whereas some of the other opponents and other bigs on other teams aren't going to be able to defend as well off the dribble. So they're going to sag a little bit more on a big being out on the 3-point line. So that opens it up for him. Your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of our athletic bigs that were guarding him. And, you're talking about an Indiana kid that's been around for a while, right? Spent some time at Iowa, I think, for 3 or 4 years. And that was a storyline that we didn't talk a ton about. But here's a guy that's from the state. And I'm sure he had no trouble getting up for this game, right? He wanted to give it to his home state school. And, he wanted to try to take it right at our big guys, right at, whoever was on him, whether it was Race or Trace. And, you saw a couple times where he was able to finish at the rim. And, he spent some time celebrating after the basket. I remember one he had where he kind of flexed to the crowd. And it just, again, it goes back to the officiating. But, yeah, I think it was a combination of like you mentioned, our athletic wings, right? They're not going to let you get too many 3-point shots off because they're able to recover. They can go out and guard and be able to guard you all the way to the hole. And then him just trying to make his presence known down low, right? I think he's a guy that, again, had this game scheduled, this game circled on his schedule and wanted to do everything he could to take it at us. So he finished the game 5 for 14. So by all accounts, we an 0 for 1 from 3. So we were able to defend him pretty well.
Now, an interesting question I wanted to bring up to you and chat, chime in on your thoughts on this one. Someone already kind of brought it up, but Race Thompson didn't have the greatest of games, but shooting 3 threes, missing all 3 of those. Should he keep shooting those? Do we want him to keep shooting those? How many misses is too many for him before he should stop shooting them during a game? What are your thoughts on Race taking those 3-point shots?
Oh man, I mean, it takes me back to anytime you see a 4, especially with, and I don't know what his career 3-point percentage is. He's obviously had some games where it's like, man, he's gone 3 for 4 from 3 or something like that, and clearly he has the green light out there. But in my opinion, it should be an extremely short leash, right? I mean, I don't think if ever we're having to lean on Race Thompson's 3-point shooting to win a basketball game, I would be a little bit concerned. I mean, if he gets a good, open, clean look out there, I'm all for it. But you kind of have to know when you're feeling it and when you're not, right? And I think he had some open looks and missed his first couple. And at that point, I think it's like, okay, maybe it's not there tonight. And again, I don't think it's just one of those things where, especially early in the game, I saw him miss some wide open looks. And I'm like, okay, it's not there tonight. Let's maybe we don't need to force something that's not there. So again, I think depending on the opponent, depending on the situation, I'm fine with him shooting threes because he's proven that he can make them. But when you're in a road environment like that and it's clear that maybe you don't have it tonight, you got to know when to flip that switch pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think I want him to keep taking them. I think my leash on him is kind of where he stood in that game, 3 to 4. I think is my leash to that. Obviously, it has to come within the rhythm, and most likely, like all 3 of those ones that he took, those were open. He did have good, clean looks at all of those, and he will continue to again because guys are wanting to stay home a little bit more and are worried about Trace Jackson Davis. And I'm confident that he'll hit him at some point and a few times. And again, I think it's a risk-benefit situation, as always, as anything is in life and situations. And the risk, I think, is a lot less than what the benefit is. And at least maybe you have to weigh it in each situation, in each game, how high that risk is. But the benefit of him making those, not only from making that shot and putting those points up there, but what that opens up is going to outweigh some risks in many situations. So I think it's going to be a gut call from him and for the coaching staff. And I think he is a veteran enough player to make those decisions and then has the coaching staff behind him to maybe rein in that leash if they do think he is being a little excessive with it. And again, there's nothing in past games that we have seen that has pointed towards him being excessive with those shots. He never really takes, I think, outside of 5 3-point shots in a game. So if he stays within this realm, I think that's fine. That's good. And again, because we're not seeing those shots taken from other places where they need to with Trey and Tamar. So we got to have someone trying to hit those. Otherwise, things are getting a little too crowded underneath otherwise. But one little positive stat-wise, at least I want to talk about, since we are kind of on shooting and everything, is just the shooting overall, field goal-wise, was a lot better in this game. And the 2 halves really tell the difference in that. Looking at the second half especially, I really like the way the Hoosiers came out in the second half, staying aggressive and everything, shooting 60% in the second half, 45% in the first, ending the whole game at 51.7%. Free throws did okay, shooting 65%, 17 on 26. Got to the line quite a bit again because of all the situations with the refs in that game. Any other stats or anything that kind of jump out to you, Martha?
No, nothing that you didn't mention. I thought just what we were able to overcome. I thought the free throw shooting, it felt good enough. I mean, obviously, you'd like to see it a little bit higher than I think 65%. But again, it felt good enough. 4 for 12 from three. I just think what we had seen leading up to that game, especially with the jump that Miller Kopp had made, and obviously we just talked about Race not feeling a little bit, but you hope that somebody can step up in that area, and make that percentage a little bit higher. But outside of that, again, you mentioned it felt like we were a basket or two away from taking complete control of the game in the second half at times, and if it wasn't for some things kind of unfolding at the end, I thought we could have. So I was impressed by that, and our 60% shooting from the field goal in the second half. Again, like you mentioned, I was really impressed by too. So again, yeah, just hopefully we can just uptick that 3-point shooting, and the next time we're on the road, shoot a little bit better there, and I think we'll be happy.
Yep, and we don't have to wait very long. IU plays in less than 9 hours. Miami of Ohio in Indianapolis. If you can get out there, try to get there. I know Martha had said that trying to get there, but can't necessarily make it to this game. But on Big Ten Network, that game's at 5:30, playing against Miami of Ohio. Should be a good win. Should be a good situation as well. And one thing I want to look for in this game is, again, situation we had last year was after big games, coming out with slow starts against lesser opponents and making games that should be wins and should be easy games into a little bit more of a challenge game. And that definitely shouldn't be for this game. We need to see guys coming out. We need to see wings shooting a little bit better. IU Artifacts, again, I got that chat up there, watching the film against Xavier and then having two weaker opponents to clean things up before UNC is big. The wings will need to come out firing on all cylinders in this game. A slow start does worry me. Again, that's what I mean. If we come out in a slow start, that's a little bit of trouble, but we've got these two games to kind of clean up things and get going, and before we have a big old game coming up soon. Your kind of thoughts and things you want to see in the game tonight?
I like the fact that I love, obviously we had the Crossroads Classic last year where we always had a game in I guess it's called Gainbridge Fieldhouse now. I still call it Conseco Fieldhouse. It's just showing my age, but I like the fact that we're still scheduling a game there. It's kind of obviously the Crossroads Classic was more of a kind of a tournament, a regional feel, if you will, but it's a type of venue that we'd be playing in come tournament time. So and those are always unique to play in. So I like getting some experience with playing a similar venue when we go out to Vegas. But just getting some experience there with the young guys, and really, we've talked a lot about what we were able to do well against Xavier and what we weren't able to do well, and hopefully we water finds its level a little bit more against Miami of Ohio, and we see some better play from the bench and from 3-point line. Miller finds his stroke a little bit, and really just to see, because getting a big win on Friday and then turning around and playing it on Sunday, it's kind of has let down written on it a little bit. So hopefully we come out and prove that theory wrong a little bit. And I don't know a lot about Miami of Ohio. I do know that Xavier's old coach is now their head coach, Travis Steele. So I think he'll get them up and going pretty well before long. But in year one, we should have no problem taking care of them. So just hope that we come out and check a lot of the boxes we were able to in the beginning of the year, and just get out and get a nice easy win.
Yep. And I actually got 3 games, I should say, before that UNC game. They got the Miami of Ohio, then Wednesday they play a game, and then Friday again. So a lot of quick games over the holiday weekend for you to enjoy before we have next week, Wednesday's UNC game, the big game of the year, a late game at 9:15 on that game. But yeah, I think that's it kind of to chime in. Let me just kind of kick it to you one last time for just, again, your overall thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I had, it was one of those, when I saw the schedule come out, I'm like, that's going to be a big ask. I think the assumption was Xavier, new coach, it's going to be a situation that should be an easy win. And I didn't necessarily believe that to be true. I think Sean Miller's, for everything that he is, and I think he's a good basketball coach, and the cupboard wasn't bare down there. I mean, they returned 3 or 4 of their starters, picked to finish second in the league. And Xavier's a team that has had tournament success, has had success within their conference. So to me, that was just like going on the Big Ten and going on the road in the Big Ten and getting a nice win. I mean, that's an environment that, you can't understate what type of environment that was to go in and get a win. So it's again, I think that in the moment it's nice to get the win, but it's going to be one that we look back on down the road and be like, man, I'm really, really glad we got that, because I think Xavier is going to go on and cause noise in their conference and have a pretty solid season. I think they have a great chance to be a tournament team themselves. So just really, really happy to, at the game towards the end that could have gone either way. So for us to lead with the W, it really sets us up well. And now we've got a chance, when you look at our schedule, we've obviously have, Arizona and North Carolina and Kansas, and if we can win 2 or 3 of those and we're looking really good going into Big Ten season. So excitement remains high on my end.
Yep. So exciting. And like you said, again, this is a win that's only going to age well like a fine wine, because Xavier's going to go in there. They're in their first year with Sean Miller, and as much as I hate to say it, he is a good coach, and he's done some good things in his first year with this team, and he's got a deep roster and some strong bigs that are going to carry them far in the Big East and going to create a lot of noise and only make this win that much sweeter as we go along. Now, with those games that we have, all those games we have coming up this week, and then we got the Oaken Bucket and women's games going on and everything. It can be a busy holiday season, and I know a lot of times you can't make it out to a lot of these games. So what do you do with those tickets? If you're not going to the games, you give those to the Hoosier Ticket Project. Martha, tell the people about how they can donate tickets.
Yeah, it's a big, the holidays are a big time for us. Everybody's home, everybody's off school. And it's a good chance for families that otherwise can't get to these games to be able to go. Right. And so if obligations get in the way from any individual being able to attend a game and you have tickets, give us a thought. Again, I just mentioned, it's a good chance for us to get those first timers there. We've got the holiday schedule that we'll be tweeting out today for men's basketball, but across Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, there's 5 or 6 home games where the students are gone. And again, good chance for us to get folks to games. The Purdue IU football game is always a fun game to send folks to as well. So you can visit our website at HoosierTicketProject.org. There's a ticket donation button. And if you're listening and you're one of those folks that could use some help getting to a game, there's a request button on there as well. So big initiative of ours is to get as many folks over the holidays to games as we can. The Big Ten schedule, our naturally our donations trickle down a little bit, and that's fine. That's expected. So again, it just kind of magnifies the importance of us doing what we can to get folks to games over the holiday season. So appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, a great situation, a great way to deal with those tickets if you can't go, rather than, again, the few bucks that you might make trying to sell those. Make someone's year, make a kid's life, being able to see those. It creates fans for life, and everything, having those experiences and everything. Just a great situation. So again, that's going to do it on this episode of Hoosier Morning After. Thanks for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at General Chadwick. Also follow Martha the Mop Lady at Martha the Mop Lady. Easy to remember. Follow us on Twitter. Go to the YouTube page. Click like, click subscribe. There you will find out when we're going live and everything. There's also a Facebook page. So if you're busy on Facebook and everything, you can go there and follow us as well. Also, thank you to those that are listening on the different podcast platforms. You can also listen to the show there. And a big thank you to the active chat today. Thank you guys for chiming in and participating with us. Always exciting to see that. We'll be back again live tomorrow morning after tonight's game. So wonderful to see a game come around us so quickly this season as we get into it. Thank you for being with us. Go out there, have a wonderful day, and as always, go Hoosiers.